The Mysterious Fate of Olef the Swede, a Mobile, Alabama sailor's tale, told by Jenny Newberry, of Gulf Coast Inspired. In March of 1939, a writer named Francois Leger-Diard interviewed an old West Indies sailor named Edden Bodden. It was part of the WPA Federal Writers Project. During their conversation, Bodden shared several tales from his half-century of sailing the Gulf Coast in the West Indian waters. This is just one of the stories. It's about a superstitious crew, a violent brawl, a mysterious encounter, and an incredible twist of fate. Rain drummed against the cobblestones, turning the street into a river of glistening puddles. Water sloshed around Edden Bodden's worn boots, soaking through the cracked leather until his toes felt like lumps of ice. His threadbare coat clung to his back like a second skin, and his hat brim sagged under the steady drip, drip, drip of rainwater. When Bodden reached the shelter of the aging warehouse at the foot of Government Street, he shook the rain from his hat and settled onto a bale of burlap bagging. Nearby, a cluster of dock workers huddled together, smoking pipes and swapping tales. "I'm used to the rain," Bodden chuckled. "Back in the West Indies, we'd get nothing but rain for 6 months straight." His bright hazel eyes twinkled beneath his dark leathered face and snowy hair. A WPA writer who had been watching a banana boat being unloaded overheard Bodden's remark. Intrigued by the obvious wealth of yarns the seaman must hold, the writer wandered over and struck up a conversation with him. Before long, the old sailor began sharing stories of a well-lived life at sea. This is just one of the tales that the writer recorded for generations to enjoy. Conversation started easily enough, with the writer asking about the old sailor's upbringing and life on the island of Old Isaac, where he'd been born in 1869. After a few minutes of conversation about pirates and buried treasure, the topic turned to sailors' superstitions. When asked if it was true that seamen were a superstitious lot, Bodden's smile widened, and he leaned in, as if sharing a secret. "I once worked on a brig named Annie Louise," Bodden began, "and never a prettier vessel entered Mobile Bay to compare with her." He described the ship's beautifully carved figurehead of a flying angel beneath her bowsprit. At night, the angel's pale white shape glowed faintly, making it appear ghostly in the dim light. Some of the crew swore the angel had a life of its own, claiming to have seen it leave the ship to chase away seagulls before returning to its place beneath the bow. "I never believed it," Bodden said with a shrug. "But one of the crew sure did. A big Swede named Olef. He was a superstitious fellow to beat the band, and the crew swore he was bad luck." One night, after the crew had been paid, Bodden and Olef spent the evening wandering the bars along Government Street. Eventually, they ended up in the old Mascot Theater, catching a live performance by George Thomas, an English singer. Bodden was shocked to notice that his companion had been moved to tears by the music. Olef, sobbing like a child, Bodden shook his head in disbelief. "And wouldn't you know, a rat named Nilsson had to make something of it." Captain Nilsson, a burly Norwegian seaman who had once worked with Olef, sneered at the Swede's tears. Didn't know you had a heart, Olef, Nilsson jeered. Thought you were too dumb to know a sad song from a foghorn. Olef shot to his feet, his face darkening. You've got a lot to say for a man who never pulled his own weight in a storm. I'd trust a seagull to tie a better reef knot than you, Nilsson snapped. Knives flashed. Bodden, though well liquored himself, made a feeble attempt to break up the fight. But it was chaos. Beer bottles shattered, tables overturned, and men scattered as the two sailors clashed. Blood spattered the floor, and according to Bodden, it took 20 men to pull them apart. Olef staggered out of the tavern, clutching his side and grimacing through the pain. It was a bloodbath, Bodden said grimly. Somehow I got Olef back to the ship, but he was laid low in his bunk for 2 days, bleeding and feverish. Dang fool wouldn't go to the marine hospital, just toughed it out. When the Annie Louise set sail for Port-au-Prince 3 days later, Olef was still too weak to stand duty. Hours out of Mobile, as the brig passed the Sand Island lighthouse, a cry rang out, "Olef's gone!" Bodden ran to the rail. The churning sea stretched out beneath them, cold and unforgiving. A scrap of white floated far behind. Maybe a shirt. Maybe nothing at all. "We've lost him," someone murmured. Some of the crew believed Olef had fallen overboard. Others were certain the sharks had claimed him, but all agreed that the Annie Louise was hoodooed. For several more nights the sailors whispered of curses and strange sights. Some claimed to see the angel figurehead hovering before the ship, pointing the way to port. Then came the strangest sight of all. One night, Bodden said, we saw a full-rigged barkentine out on the water. 3 masts, colored sails billowing in the wind. And sure as I'm sitting here, some of our crew swore they saw sailors on that ship waving to us. A mirage, the captain said. But we'd seen mirages before. Nothing like that. In spite of the whispers and omens, the Annie Louise made port in Key West without incident before continuing to Port-au-Prince. Yet when they arrived, fate had one more twist in store. There, on the deck of another ship called the Mary, stood Olef, pale, scarred, and grinning like the devil himself. "Told you I'd outlive you all," Olef bellowed, his voice rolling across the water like thunder. It turned out the Mary had fished Olef from the Gulf after he'd spent hours swimming, barely alive. The Annie Louise crew refused to let him rejoin them, and Olef continued on with the Mary. Bodden laughed at the memory. The crew swore Olef had a devil in him, and to this day, I half believe it myself. Thank you for stopping by. I've enjoyed spending some time with you today. Subscribe for more encouragement in your life, and visit GulfCoastInspired.com for devotionals, coloring books, and stories that celebrate faith and resilience. I'll see you in the next one.